Hello and welcome to Photographic Connections, the podcast where we create connection to self, nature and others through the art of photography. My name is Kim Grant, the founder of Photographic Connections and your host for this podcast. And today I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Sarah Lyndsay onto the podcast. Sarah is a self-portrait and landscape photographer based in Canada who's well known for photographing herself wearing a yellow dress in nature. She shares how her challenging upbringing led her on a deep journey of self-exploration and healing, which she now uses as a catalyst to share her life openly with the world online through her photography and YouTube videos. She also shares the importance of mindset and genuine human connection and what her dreams are for the future. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Sarah Lyndsay. Hi Sarah, thank you so much for coming on to the podcast this week. It's a real pleasure to connect with you. I've seen a number of your Instagram posts over the years with your famous yellow dress, which we'll get onto a little bit later. But the reason I reached out to you today is because my dad was really keen to have you on the podcast because he saw a recent video you uploaded onto YouTube called For Those Who Feel Like Giving Up. And I'd like to delve a little bit into that a bit later. But for now, I wondered, everyone that comes on the podcast, I get them to go way back to the beginning of their journey and basically share with everybody, what got you into photography in the first place?
Perfect. Awesome. Okay. Well, first, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to do this. I love talking about all things photography. So, my journey kind of actually started a little bit differently, and this usually shocks people. I was in my early 20s and I was actually on a date with a fella, and he brought me over to his place, and he's like, "Oh, do you want to see what I like to do on my computer?" And I was like, "Okay, yeah, absolutely." So he pulled up Photoshop, and he actually he was a photographer himself, but he would take his images, and then he more so likes the process of editing and like piecing things together and textures. So his goal, I think, was to make like album covers. Anyways, I wasn't like drawn to the style of what he was creating, but I was so fascinated with Photoshop and that you could just put something together like that. So it actually started in Photoshop for me first. I just wanted to create things, and then I knew I needed a camera to be able to take images, to be able to play around in Photoshop. So I just borrowed like my parents. It was a point and shoot at the time. So I just borrowed that and I started taking images of like jewelry and flowers and just anything that I could find. And then I would just invest myself in this editing process. So that's where it started. And then eventually I just obviously loved the process of photography. So I was like, okay, I want to learn how to do this. And then it just took off from there. And I haven't stopped since.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, I remember you speaking about that in the video that I referred to at the beginning. And I think it's fascinating to hear everybody's stories. And your one, I
Mhm.
think, is slightly different to some people's. But I
Yes.
love that the editing caught you from the beginning because I don't think I've heard that before. Usually people go out and they connect with the camera first, or, it was passed on to them through their generations. But for you, it was like editing came before anything else. I wondered if you could delve a little bit more into that, because I remember one thing you referred to was the editing. You felt this sense of solace when you were on the computer editing, which I thought was quite an interesting thing to say.
Yes. Well, so everything that I'm going to tell you, it actually, like, I'm basically actually starting at the beginning of the yellow dress story because it just evolves so nicely with the yellow dress and how everything came to be. But I think, like, looking back now, I think why I was so drawn to the editing process, because I do believe when we edit, and I know many other photographers will say the same thing, it's like a mindful space. So I felt like in that in my early 20s, like I had didn't really have anything going on for my life. And obviously when we get to the yellow dress part, like you'll understand my past. But I really, yeah, I felt like I just had nothing. Like I was just nobody. So I'll always remember that feeling of creation. And you can create in Photoshop. So it was just the process of like, oh my gosh, I can create something and it's a masterpiece and I did it, and it was my quiet space and it was my mindful space where I could just shut off my mind. So I'll never forget that feeling. And I still have that to this day with photography and editing.
Yes, and you mentioned there a little bit that you're getting on to the beginning of the yellow dress story. So I wondered if you could continue that and explain this, because for those who aren't aware of you, your most famous work, I guess we'd say, is you photographing yourself in the beautiful world of nature in a yellow dress, quite often in water or sitting on rocks, and just beautiful, very like you know as soon as you see them that it's your imagery. So yeah, I'd love you to share that story. I'm sure you've shared it many times before, but I'm sure everyone would
Yes.
love to hear it.
Yeah, it goes in chapters for me. Like there's 3 chapters to it. And yes, I have shared this story many times. But so when like that's the early stages, and I think why I stress so much on like I didn't really have anything at the time, and how I just like latched onto this feeling of creation. This has a big role to do in the development into the yellow dress, and how basically photography was like the tool that guided me to actually like become the person that I wanted to become. So in those very early years of photography, I was just the hobbyist. I didn't pursue it as a profession because it was just, again, that mindful space that was so near and dear to me. I didn't really see, back then, I couldn't understand that there was so much potential to turn it into something. So for me, it was the passion that came first and was always the driving factor of creating and like my journey. And then so in the very early years, I basically became like a master at becoming a generalist, because for years and years and years I was focused on landscape portraits, I did weddings, I did everything. So I naturally just built up this kind of career for myself that, by becoming a generalist. But it was when the self portraits many years later came in, that's when everything started to change. And I realized that I was actually an artist, because I do believe art, like artists, photographers are artists if they want to step into that role, but an artist is a little bit different than just being a photographer. So that was the chapter, I call it chapter 1. That was the skill building that I did. I was just obsessed with photography, and all I wanted to do is master my skill. So that was a very important part, because that's why my self portraits now in the yellow dress look the way that they do, and how I've been able to build a brand out of it. So when we get to chapter 2, because chapter 2 is the really like the pivotal changing moment and everything, and it's definitely the deepest part of the story. So it was actually in 2019, so it's right before COVID came, actually. And I just remember I was getting a little bit bored of just doing landscape photography. And again, I'm a person that needs to experiment with my art form. Like I have to evolve, and I can't just stay doing one thing the whole time. So I was a little bit bored with the landscape photography, and but I still wanted to create. So I was like, okay, I have portrait skills and I have landscape photography skills. So what can I do with this? And I've worked with many models before, but I remember this night I was like, there's no time for me to get a model. I'm just going to use myself. And the only dress that I had at the time was a white dress. So it actually started with white. So I took my dress. I was a pretty moody, was sunset. It was a pretty moody sunset. And I knew that the white dress would contrast against the mood and all that. So I went to the lake and I did like a typical landscape photo like I would normally do, which is the long exposure technique combined with my style with composition. And I just placed myself in the scene in the white dress. And I loved doing it. That was the most important thing, is I was just, oh, I love this. I want to see what more I can do with this style. But it was the response also that I got from like my audience. They really enjoyed like seeing that self-portrait, and then it just caught fire for me. So for the remainder of the next following years, it's 4 years that this chapter actually went on, and it bleeds into the yellow dress. But that was also when 2019 to the beginning of 2020, that's also when I started going through a divorce. And my divorce just completely flipped my life upside down. But surprisingly for people is that I will say that it was actually me that like kind of caused this. So this chapter was like rock bottom, but also it became very, very important to me that I recognized like what I had done to my life. Like I was married, I lost my house, I lost a potential family. I was just about to start having a child, and I made some mistakes that led to that. And I eventually hit rock bottom, and with nothing, like I had nothing absolutely going on. And I remember during this time, this was also when I was still creating all those self portraits. Like these self portraits before the yellow dress have such profound meaning in this chapter, because that's all I was focused on creating. But during that time, I typically, when you hit rock bottom, you are like, okay, this is not good, and you start to go wander through your mind, and sometimes it's not always good thoughts. But I remember I had this moment where I just felt so like hopeless and helpless, and obviously faced with like this guilt of that I turned my life upside down, that I didn't really want to be around anymore. So I was starting to go down that path in my mind. And I was, during that time, because I was alone, I was living on a in a big camper on a lake, which was incredible, to be quite honest, like just having that nature around me. But I also had Ollie, who you can just only see the back end of him. But I was responsible for Ollie, and I remember I was laying there with him one night and going like through those thoughts, those really bad thoughts, and I just looked at him and I was like, okay, I'm an adult. I cannot do this to him. I have to take care of him. Like, what would happen to him? And that just broke my heart. Like, that thought alone of he's so innocent. Like, he needs me. So, after that night, the next morning, I actually began like my journey into therapy and went to my doctor and just said, okay, it's time to change my life. And only I have the power to do that. And that meant I had to change me. And actually, there's a part that I left out that is quite important. I don't always know how to talk about this part just out of respect of people, but I was a person who like grew up with a really chaotic childhood. So I had those childhood traumas, and it just wasn't a good environment for a kid whatsoever. So obviously I learned like how much my past had like a grip on my adult life. And that's also when I began the journey, like through therapy, of unpacking childhood trauma so that I could become a different person. Because you kind of have to face it. It's hard to explain. Not many people ever go through this journey. Not many people grow up the same way that I did, but many, many people do. And if anybody ever tries to basically become a different person from what they know or what they were modeled by their parents, I can't describe it. It takes years, and it's one of the most loneliest journeys ever. You almost go into like another dimension. And but it's very rewarding when you come out at the end of it. So I had, at the same time I was doing this journey, I built up this portfolio of all the other color dresses before yellow came. So many people ask me online, when are you going to stop just using yellow? When are you going to bring back the other colors? Which could potentially happen in the future, but they just don't know how important this chapter was to the growth of the yellow dress. Which is why I share the story so much, because it delves way deeper than just being a photographer. It's like photography and my personal development journey are the same, and they help each other, and it helps me grow. So that is chapter 2. It's a very important chapter.
Yes, it's very important. And I almost had goosebumps listening to you there because there's so much of your story that resonates with mine. Of course, you and
Oh,
I,
good.
very different people. But yeah, I mean, I kind of went through a lot of, I think probably different trauma as a child, but yeah, I've been on a 10-year, what are we now? No, 12-year journey of different therapies and all sorts of stuff, and gone on that self-development journey. So I totally get what you mean about it. But I am a completely different person now to who I was even
Yeah,
5 years ago, never
good.
mind 10 years ago. So I just
Yeah.
wanted to advocate that for anyone listening, the importance, I think, of if you've been through any trauma in your life, no matter what it may be, or even if you don't class it as trauma, I think we all have things from childhood. Even if we feel we had a good childhood, we all have stuff. And actually going on that journey of finding a therapist that actually works for you, but also doing a lot of other things around it, like creativity, getting out into nature, all the things that you've brought together as I have in my life to heal what we've been through and come out the other end. It's such a worthwhile journey, isn't it?
Absolutely. It was a really hard journey, but
Mm.
it changed my entire life. And then when you do that, when you change your life, like no one else is going to do it for you. So my parents aren't going to do it for me. It's really boiled down to me. And I do believe as individuals, we need to have that responsibility and self awareness, no matter how big your traumas are. You are so right that everybody has traumas. Everybody just has like a different tragedy in their life, but everybody has the possibility to change their mindset and become strong, become a stronger person. Otherwise, if you don't, if you just remain on the same path, like you're just gonna you're gonna have repeat situations. It's just gonna be chaotic. And I just knew, I was like, I can't live this sort of life anymore. So yes, that the hard journey was well worth it, but that's anything in life. And then it evolves into what the yellow dress become, which is chapter 3.
It's fantastic. I just love that you share it so openly with the world as well, because it's one thing to go through this journey, but to actually have, in many ways, the courage to speak about it openly as well. I mean, I feel we need so much more of this online. There's so much negativity online, especially in social media spaces. So to have people like yourself who are sharing openly a lot of what you've been through your imagery as well as your YouTube channel, we connect with people when we feel that emotional connection to them. And if we're not open and honest, I think, about our life, and especially when we can have that hope for people that there is light at the end of the tunnel,
Yes,
it's an
absolutely.
important thing to do, definitely.
Yeah. Yes. I'm a big believer in purpose. So when we get to the yellow dress, like you'll see how that all ties together and how just this whole new path of life unfolded for me, which has been incredible.
Yeah, I think for me, my one of my pivotal moments was starting YouTube. So I've never really photographed myself, but of course I filmed myself for a number of years now. But it was actually through doing that I found my voice, because that was the thing with me when I was a child. I didn't have a voice. Like I didn't feel able to speak. I was so shy. So actually talking to the camera was what brought me through my creative thing. A bit similar to you, of course,
Yay!
photographing yourself and seeing
Good.
this evolution. Um,
Yeah.
so speaking
Good.
about YouTube, I wondered what got you started in the YouTube world?
So, well, when did I start YouTube? I think that was around 2020. So it was really about like also a business transition as well because COVID happened. We all know what COVID did and took away all the work and it just made things very difficult. So I knew and actually this is really important as well because I do believe that certain people will come into your life that will they'll either inspire you in some way or encourage you in some way. And I had with Instagram, I have always been very active on my stories, sharing the behind the scenes and things like this. But that stories, they disappear in 24 hours. And so I already knew I loved talking to the camera. I wasn't good at it, but I knew I liked doing it. I liked sharing things because I'm so open. And then Nigel Danson reached out to me and I can't fully remember the conversation, but he basically said, you need to be on YouTube. And then he told me the story, like his story about how he had like this pivotal moment with YouTube. I think he had broken his back. He talks about that quite a bit, had a bad accident. So health wise, when he started YouTube, he started it just like we did. He had this moment again with through an accident that he was like, it's now or never to build this. So he shared his story with me and he just gave me this encouragement. Like I never asked him, I never reached out to him. He reached out to me. He gave me this encouragement saying, you need to be on YouTube because of what you're doing now. And obviously Nigel is great. So I was like, oh, that's amazing. It gave me that push to start the channel. I don't think he knows that actually.
Wow, that's so
How much he
powerful.
contributed.
That's
Yeah.
incredible. I mean, I totally resonate with what
Yeah.
you say there about sometimes people come into our
Yeah.
lives to inspire us. And it's funny because sometimes when we're at a low point, which I guess, this kind of correlated going by the dates with when you were in a low point, it's almost like sometimes there's these, I don't know what to call them, angels or something that just
Angels.
reach out to
Yeah.
us and, they give us
Yes.
some wisdom or a
Yep.
suggestion or an idea. Um, And yeah, it's fascinating, and I think that's amazing that Nigel did that, and that's very kind to him. He's a very
Yes.
kind guy, and he definitely wants to see other people
Yeah, he
succeed,
is.
which is lovely.
Yeah, he's so sweet. I don't think we realize the power of encouragement, what it can do to people's lives. So I've obviously blended this in now with my brand because people had encouraged me. So I know the power of it. And I know that I can help other people as well.
Yeah. Where do you
Yeah.
think you find the confidence, I guess, to share so openly? Because I've watched a couple of your videos the last few days. You know, you've spoken about being out there now in the dating world and all sorts of things, and you're tying that in with your photography. But I love it because
Yeah.
you're giving that human element behind the photographer who's creating the videos.
I know the dating stuff has been fun. Well, that's, I mean, we can maybe near the end we can get into the dating portion, but because that's the season of life I'm in right now. So I don't know how to shut off Sarah from photography and what I do. Like, it just is who I am to be open and vulnerable. And that actually comes along with also how I grew up. Like, not that I there's good things that I learned from my parents, of course, but I do believe some of the good things, and because I had such a traumatic childhood, that actually created that vulnerability in me and that openness. And a lot of people, actually get challenged a lot about this. And if I have any insecurities, it still is this, because sometimes what people say to me can definitely affect me. But a lot of people are like, you're too open, you're too vulnerable, maybe you're too emotional. And it's, I know with a lot of them, they're just trying to protect me from what I share online. And I understand that. So sometimes that affects me and I can get a little discouraged, and I think like maybe I shouldn't be sharing so much about who I am, and that's a very short-lived feeling until I'm like, no way. This is just who I am. I can embrace it. So I actually now try to almost fight for openness and vulnerability. Of course, you always want to protect yourself, but many people see them as weaknesses, but it's actually a strength. It's almost like the people who really aren't vulnerable and open, there's nothing wrong with that, but I find that they kind of lack this ability to be able to connect with others. But that's
Yeah.
just going way too deep into
No,
psychology, but
it's
I
not.
notice it.
No, it's good. No, I love this. I love deeper chats on this because it's nice because it's something that a lot of podcasts don't do. They want to know the technicalities and the gear and all that, whereas this is about
Yes.
your connection to
Yes.
photography. You know, who are you and what makes
Yeah.
that up? And it's interesting. I just I love that. I mean, of course, we've got to get a balance, right? Don't we? But it is this openness is so important. There's somebody I listen to. She's a podcaster and a public speaker called Blue. She's from the UK originally. Have you maybe come across her? I'm from the UK
No, I have
originally.
not actually, but I will. I'll definitely look
Yeah,
into it.
and she now lives in America, in LA, but she's got a podcast that basically she speaks so openly about her life, and she speaks a lot about, you know, when we are open and honest and people come back to us and tell us to, you know, stop saying so much and stop being so emotional. Really what it's doing is we're kind of triggering something that's uncomfortable within them, which
Yes.
isn't a nice thing for
Yes.
us to do, like feel like we're doing, but equally it's like
Yeah.
it's trying to open people up, isn't it? And the more of us that are open and honest in the world, I think the more it encourages other people to do the same. And we can only heal from our insecurities and our traumas if we do talk to them, we do work through them, and we do move that energy. So yeah, I just wanted
Yes.
to say
And
that.
yeah, absolutely. And in like a grand scale, I really believe like the ability to be open and to be vulnerable is, it's just the way that you can create these new connections. And I'm very like I'm logical as well, where I understand I'm on the internet. There's people have so much access to me, of course. It's like, you know, you've got to be able to protect yourself as well. But then I almost feel like I am, if I go closed, and I could definitely pivot my YouTube channel to teach all the technical stuff, but if I do that and I close off, I almost feel like I am doing a disservice to the world, because I know that my story can help people. I know that if I share it, it'll impact maybe at least even one person, and I feel like I have a purpose if I am doing that. So I do try to look at it that way, as like, well, if I have these values now, I have this way of thinking, and I do believe it's right. I do believe it's the truth. I can help other people who have possibly been in similar situations. It's very tricky though when you're so niche into photography, because that's the audience is photographers. But the response that I've gotten is, especially on that last video, the yellow dress story, it's just been incredible. Like the way the people in the comment section that they can connect to me, I know that I'm tapping into something.
Mm. And it's like you have this deep inner almost intuition to keep going. And there's so many YouTube channels out there that can teach us how to do photography. It's like how many times can we say the same thing over and over again? And really it's you. People are going to connect with you. And I genuinely believe we're all here to tell our story, to help humanity so that we can have that connection and we can learn to love and heal each other. And that's exactly what you're doing,
Yes.
which is so beautiful.
Yes, absolutely. I'm yeah, so chapter 3 with the yellow dress, like it'll explain a lot about how I believe in purpose and how I've linked purpose with my craft and like with my profession, because I think purpose is just such a great driving force no matter what you are doing in your life.
Mm. Yes. Well, shall we go on to chapter 3?
Yes. It's the finale, I guess, of that.
Woo!
However, we are actually evolving into chapter 4, so we will have to touch base on that
Oh my gosh.
because
Okay.
I
Yes.
know, because it's kind of been materializing for me in these last few months, chapter 4. But so chapter 3 is, so obviously I started on this path of like personal development, and I want to stress so much that um, it was about changing my bad ways. It wasn't about like becoming strong so I can get toxic people away from me or something like that. It was like, no, get to the root of the problem. You're the cause of the problem, so now change it. So when I got the yellow dress, so how I actually had all of these dresses was because, again, I was a generalist. So I worked with clients, I worked with women, like maternity shoots. So that's where the dresses actually come from. And I decided, I was like, okay, I'm going to add yellow to the collection. So it was the last one that was added to my dress closet, I guess you could say. And I sort of photographed a few other girls in it. And then I started using it in the self portrait. So I was like, okay, it's time to add in a new color. And I don't know what happened in that moment, but it was like I just never stopped using the yellow dress. And it was like I just instinctively would reach for it. And I actually went to New Zealand during this time, and I only brought one dress, and it was yellow. So internationally, because I travel for work as well, it was like the yellow dress was the first one that came on that journey. So I knew that there was this connection. And I would still get the comments on Instagram like, oh, you're using that dress color quite a bit. Where's the other ones? And I'm like, shut up. I feel like doing it. I want to use it. So, well, when I went through all like the really, really hard development parts of like actually changing who I was, you'd have like a clean slate almost of who do you want to become. So based on like my values that I just believe so deeply in my heart, I basically tied the yellow dress because of what what yellow represents is, well, we all know, we see yellow, we think of sunshine, it's positive, it is bright, it is cheerful, it is, children are drawn to it because it's such a eye-catching color. So it really means all of these great things. And I just knew, I was like, oh, I want to be the yellow dress. So I always remember this quote. I don't remember the author, that's terrible of me, but it is, if you want to feel like sunshine, you need to act like sunshine. So it was like the yellow dress and that decision in my mind of who I wanted to become, they just connected. And then in the span of 2 years, I built a brand. Like most people will look at me and like my brand, and probably the vibe that they get is Disney or something like that. And I know that, and I want that to be that way. So I built this recognizable brand and started to come into being more like open and vulnerable. And in 2 years, my life changed very quickly, business wise, and then personally as a person. So I've never found so much success with the photography company than when the yellow dress came into play, which is very niche, which would probably shock most people. Like, how do you monetize off of self portraits? I don't know. It was a confusing journey, but it just happened. And because that, I knew that I had tapped into how to actually build a brand, an authentic brand. That's the most important thing, is the authenticity. And then I also just sort of skyrocketed as a person. I definitely am not at my goals yet, which we will cover in chapter 4, but I work every day towards it. And I only surround myself, well, I try very hard to surround myself with people that help me stay on that path. That's very important. And when we touch base on dating, you will also understand why. So that is yeah, that is basically what the yellow dress did for my life and what it's become. And again, now it is the face of my brand.
Yeah. Well, I'm very excited for chapter 4 and the dating section, but for now, I want to just go back a little bit there to what you'd said about color, because one thing when I started Photographic Connections, as well as the podcast, we also have an online community, and the first ever webinar I hosted to the community was about color, and it is important. I think we go out and we do photography, and we're taught often, about the blues and the yellows and how to use oranges and stuff, to complement each other, but we don't always think about the emotional impact of those colors. And it's something that came to me straight at the beginning of this project. And I love listening to you speak about what yellow represents. And it's almost like, as you said there, as you became your authentic self, as you became happier, as you adopted all of these positive mindsets, quotes and phrases and everything, it's like it just shows that when we become our authentic self and listen to that inner calling, a lot else in life just falls into place. And I mean,
Yeah.
it sounds almost magical, but the amount of people and stories that I've heard,
Yeah.
you're the first photographer I think I've spoken to who said this, but the amount of things I surround myself with in other parts of my life, people and
Yeah.
podcasts and inspiration, so many of them say the same
Yes.
thing. And you're just
Yes.
living proof of that, which I think it's very inspiring once again to hear.
No, well, I'm happy to hear that because, yes, that makes me feel good. That gives me more drive to be more open and be vulnerable and share as much as I can.
Yes, brilliant, exciting. I'd like to hear all about chapter 4 now because this sounds like the future, which is really exciting.
Yes, it is. And I can almost see it. I can like see it unfolding for myself. And yeah, so chapter 4. So I have a new dress now. No one's seen it yet. I haven't created with it yet, but I'm going to. I just know that it has to be the right creation. I can't really explain that, but it's going to be a big moment because I'm introducing the new dress. So I've actually now partnered with a company who made me this dress. And so that's very cool just to see on the business front, like to be able to have these partnerships. So they sent me the dress and it is absolutely beautiful. And I do believe, like, I'll always share the other 3 chapters. I know that I will continue to share it for a very long time, but I almost feel like it's time to now put chapter 3 to a close and we're going into chapter 4. And basically, where I'm at in my life, and again, the yellow dress mirrors my life, is, I've done all that work. I'm a divorced person. I truly believe that um, it's very something that actually that I struggle with is the fact, and I'm sure you can relate to this. I don't know if you're married or have a family or anything, but when we are photographers, we're working alone. And for someone like me, I also live alone. So that's like the biggest struggle that I face right now. There's no desperation about it. It's just I recognize my situation and I recognize it's actually not healthy. So I have, after all of my healing, I've had to become very proactive, knowing like it's almost a survival mechanism, me like I need to get out of this situation so I can continue to be healthy. So I'm very proactive with dating. And the reason why I can see this chapter linking with the yellow dress is because I'm also very deeply interested in femininity, true femininity. And this, like what I'm about to say, will probably in some way be like, not everybody has these beliefs, but I believe that feminism globally has just almost been destroyed, and it breaks my heart to like see what a lot of women have become. And I know because I used to be a woman like that and it destroyed my life. So right now what I'm invested in is just becoming the most feminine version of myself possible and leaning into my femininity and like learning what makes it, because I want to be married again one day. So learning what I should strive for to be a good wife, and understanding men so that I can have the most healthy relationship moving forward, because I absolutely plan on getting married again. And this is what that yellow dress now represents for me, is femininity. So it's stepping into my womanhood. And since I'm dating at the same time, which has been such an interesting experience. I have some funny stories, but I got to like this point with dating. Every like date that I meet, every man that I meet, I just look at them as stepping stones and lessons as well. Like they teach me so many things. And so I don't know. He's probably going to listen to this podcast, but I won't share names or like details or anything. But it's been recently that I met this man, and I've it's been a very short time, but all the only thing me and him do is talk and talk, and we talk about this stuff like almost daily. And so I've known him for about 2 months, and no, maybe 2.5 months, and we've been dating, and it's been going very slowly, which is very good. I'm a very impatient person, so I appreciate that it's going slow. But it's like the first time, I can't really describe it. It's the first time I've ever connected with a man on this dating level where I have truly felt like a woman, like how he treats me, and his it's like his masculinity, it just oozes onto me, and I just feel like I can fully step into being a woman. And one thing that strikes me about him, and a lot of people might not think this way, but I do. So when you kind of meet a man like this, you women tend to go into like a fantasy land inside of their head. You think about babies, you think about all this. And I actually believe that that is a really great goal for a woman to strive for. So when you meet a man that triggers that in you, that is just gives you, it's almost like he doesn't do it directly, but it's indirectly, like he gives me that push to strive to be that type of woman, and to like show that I can provide my femininity and create a very healthy relationship. So he really strikes me as someone who has stood out. And now like he's also been, because we chat so much, we have such deep conversations, that he just helps me even understand my femininity even more. And so that's kind of where it's at with him. But he's also someone that I just believe it's worth being patient for, like getting to know him, because I see him as a man, a true man, like a very masculine man. So we will see how that part develops. But that's kind of going along with my new chapter, I guess. Like, I want to get married again. Yes, I'm a business owner. Yes, I am that very independent female that can do all the things on my own, even though I actually don't think I can do them on my own. So that's where I'm at. It's probably more going to be a bit of a love story coming,
Mm.
well, hopefully coming soon. So yeah, I'm excited to kind of dive into that with creation, because I'm going to create with it.
Brilliant. It sounds like there's a lot of exciting stuff going on for you right now, and I'm genuinely very happy that you have, met somebody who can speak to you on the level that really connects, because it's so difficult to find that, it's very
Yeah.
rare. So I really hope things continue to go well for you and him, because there's a lot of excitement there. But I think it's also really good
Yeah.
to go back and just say, there's a famous saying, isn't there, that we can, like, we go through things in our life in order to heal them, but then to go on to help other people, and to, our, what is it, it's like our pain is our strength or something like that. It's about,
Yes, yes,
yeah,
yes.
yeah, and what you're doing
I
now with
there's
your passions definitely
Yeah.
mirrors that.
Yes, there's this one. I had this one image, this one yellow dress image, because as a little girl, I dreamt so much of being able to go to the UK and go to London. And I don't know, I just wanted to go to London so bad. So I actually made that a reality, and I spent a lot of time in the UK with the yellow dress creating, which was such an amazing time for me. And one of the last images that I created was in the heart of London, in the most unsuspected places. Like everyone asked me after, how did you find that in the middle of London? And I was like, that's what I do, guys. So I found this, that I'm sure you maybe have heard of it, but it's called St. Dunstan's Church. And it was a church that was burned down in the Great Fire of London, but the walls still stood. So it was completely burned down, but the walls still stood. So there was still a foundation. And then that church evolved into this beautiful park setting. Like it's probably even more beautiful now with how it's a little bit burnt and broken, but there's like life sprouting through it. It has foliage, it has flowers. It's the most stunning thing I've ever seen, honestly. And I created a yellow dress image there. And I just feel that like the dress is my scars, and I wear those scars as my best attire. And that image, I have a huge connection with that image actually. And I got to fulfill my dream as a little girl, travel to London, and never thought I'd be photographing there. So that was very cool. So yes, absolutely, I believe our scars, as long as you make the right decisions after you got those scars, you can do some very powerful things. And it's okay to have scars. You got to be proud to wear your scars. So the yellow dress is also a scar for me as well. Not the new
Yeah.
one though, because the new one's a different chapter.
Yes. I'm gonna have to find this image that you just described in London because it
I
sounds
will, yes,
beautiful.
and
Yeah,
I'll
share
send
me
it to
it.
you as
Yeah.
well. Yeah,
Yeah,
yes,
brilliant. Yeah. And
yes,
that's one other thing I'd kind of like to end things on really today is you're very open about the fact that if we help other people, we begin to help ourselves, which really ties in nicely with
yes,
what we've just been speaking about.
yes.
So yeah, I wondered if you could delve and speak a little bit more about that.
Well, so I just noticed as like kind of after I came out of the healing portion, but I also want to say that I don't believe the healing ever ends. Like I know that I'll always be on this path, which actually I forgot to touch base on this, which is stress where I stress so much about that you do surround yourself with the right people because they'll keep you on that healing path. You know, one kind of bad apple, of course, hold space for everybody, have boundaries with them, but one bad apple can really derail you off of your path. So that's why I'm pretty big on surrounding myself with good people. But I feel as so the more that I actually help other people, everything else in my life, it just seems to get better. So my business gets better because community, like that is how you build a business, is by helping, help without expectation of anything in return. And that is by far one of the fastest tracks. Like for us on YouTube, we're helping people, so that is why we're growing, whether we believe it or not. But then also, like when I help other people, like I just feel like I have more of a connection with my purpose and more of a drive to carry on being the type of person that I am now. Like it gives me that fire, it gives me that motivation every time I can help see the change in that person. I just want to stay on that path. So I do believe helping others essentially helps yourself as well.
Yes, and I can definitely, relate to that as well. I think the more we do for other people and we help them and we support them, we also learn so much more about ourselves, don't we? The more people we surround ourselves with and assist, it's like that two-way thing. We're all helping and supporting each other in many respects. And yeah, yeah. Oh, it's beautiful. And yeah, I know you're a great believer as well in the fact that we always have the choice to move forwards. And it's like I kind of think that's a really beautiful place to end is this choice point. And there's just one last thing I was thinking, like with you and your energy and how you've spoken today. I just feel like you have such clear intentions about where you want your life to go. And it's like almost like you don't let anything get in your way. You're like, this is what I want. I want to get married again. I want to be with a man who's respectful, who stimulates my feminism and accepts that and brings it out in me. I want to be
Yeah.
doing stuff in my yellow dress. It's like you're very clear on what you want. And it almost is like
Yes.
you've managed to manifest that, which is incredible. Have you got any
Yes.
advice for anybody who's maybe feeling really stuck in their life and they have these, things they'd like to do, but they don't feel like it'll ever happen or they don't have that belief? What can they do to
Yeah.
be like, this is my future and I'm going to go and get it?
Yes. Well, so I believe understanding, like, there's two things to this. So, because of the journey I went on, I had to really actually understand what purpose is. And we all have purpose if we take the time to look into it. But something that I learned along the way was that with purpose, and again, this goes back to helping others. Like, if you solve your own problems first, then you can help other people solve their problems. And that's purpose. That is like the easiest definition of what purpose means, and again goes back to with the helping others. And that struck me just so, like in terms of like a career or just relationship development or friends or whatever, you can apply this there. But I think it more ties so into career, that like a lot of people are like, how do I find my voice, how do I find my niche, how do I find this? And again, solve your own problems first, and then take what you're interested, whatever craft, and then help other people solve their problems through that. It's very, very powerful to think that way. And then also another thing that kept me on my path, and what keeps me on my path to this very day, is that I believe we are meant to be broken so that we can reach this level. But when I was so broken, it was so scary. It was like staring into this darkness. I've never felt this feeling before. And I was so alone, so alone. And I never want to feel that way again. And that keeps that is where my drive comes from. That is where, like, my drive to be like, I know I need partnership, I know I need to put this into my career. Every time I think about what could be that rock bottom, like, I don't want to end up homeless, I don't want to end up a drug addict. So this is getting really intense, that stuff, but I don't ever want to fall down that path. And when you can understand how easy it is because of the world that we live in to actually fall into that path, like, that's a terrifying thought to me. So that's my drive. That is my motivator. I don't actually fully believe in motivation as like the full driving force of how people move forward. I believe it's actually the nitty gritty of consistency that's huge. Because you're not always going to feel motivated. Like, don't look for motivation. You have to find that grit in yourself to remain consistent and like disciplined. A lot of people don't look at that. They might read some inspirational quote on the internet, which, yes, is all great and fine and dandy, and they might get this little spurt of motivation, but that's not going to stick. It's like you have to really drive those other they're not values, but drive, like discipline in yourself and consistency.
Yeah, definitely. And I think when you look at anybody's story who's maybe gone from like a corporate world, normal 9 to 5 job. I say normal, nothing's normal nowadays, is it? But people who have done that and then set up their own businesses, usually it's because in the evenings and at the weekends, they always find some time to dedicate to their dream. Whereas if you think, oh, I want to do this, but you only, like you say, have these spurts, it's like you've got to do something small. I always say it's the small things, isn't it? That consistency you spoke about. But it's like every day, just find something small you can do that can just move you one step forward to what you dream of having. And
Absolutely.
also have the faith. Have faith. Miracles do
Yes,
happen.
faith, of course. Yes, absolutely. I remember that. So I'll say one more thing because I actually just learned this the other day. Made me feel better because I was this type of person. But so there's, if you look at like an A student, a B student, and a C student in school, like let's say high school, it's typically the A students that end up going to work for the government under someone else, or they're very smart, obviously, but that's kind of where their journey ends. B students are more like the blue collar trades. Obviously, all these things are really great and we need them in the world. And then C students go on to be entrepreneurs. So that's an
Mm,
interesting thought, right?
that is
Because
interesting.
it takes, I know it is such an interesting thing. And I was like, oh gosh, thank goodness, because I was like the C minus student. So, but I think where that stems from is, I don't know if this is like this for other people, but when you're kind of the child that is not the straight A student, not the one that is doing everything by the textbook, you almost build up this bravery and this like, you're more likely to step outside of the box and actually push the rules because no one is constricting you. And I think that is why entrepreneurs are entrepreneurs. Like, these are people that want more. They want to step outside of the box, and they're, oh, I want to say, almost wild enough and impulsive enough to do it. And that's what it takes.
Mm. Yeah, it's interesting when you
Interesting
say
little
that.
fact.
It is, because when I look at a lot of the biggest entrepreneurs in the world, a lot of them speak about how they were like school dropouts. They didn't, they dropped out university, this, that, and the next thing. I really wish I could relate to that in some ways. Unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, but I,
Oh,
I did I did pretty well at school, apart from maths and French.
yeah.
God, I was like failed maths, French, and chemistry. But everything else, I was like an almost. I was getting A's and B's. But then I felt this pressure
Yeah.
to go to university, and then that's what I did.
Hmm.
It's not that I felt pressure, but like from school and stuff, they were like, "You've got all these
Yeah.
good
Okay.
grades, you need to go to
Yeah.
university." So I was like, "Okay." And to be honest, I didn't enjoy university very much. I mean, it brought me out of my shell, and I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing today if I hadn't have gone there and studied nursing. But for me, it's been this huge process of trying to understand that you can make a living from creativity and understand the
Yes.
business world, because it's something that I just didn't grow up with. And it's almost been like that's been part of my relearning. It's like, yeah, kind of getting away from societal pressure and the norms of, you've
Yes.
got good
Yes.
grades, you can do things, and then going back. But what you say there, I know, and I feel anyway from what I've heard is a vast majority of entrepreneurs, they weren't academic. They've just had this drive and this creative ambition, and it's their creativity that's got them
Yes.
there. So, yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Well, the people that are A and B students, I mean, if they decide to go the path of like being an entrepreneur, it'll probably be easier for them, I will say, because they do have that that academic built up already, and that stuff is very important to learn. So the C students kind of have to take that on as well and learn.
Mm.
You
See,
still
I
need those
think
smarts.
Yeah, but I do think it's about people skills, and that's something I never had growing up, But if you were more the kids that were playing up and maybe socializing when you were a teenager and doing things that are maybe deemed as not very, good,
Yes.
for instance,
Yes.
you're the one socializing and getting the people skills
Yep.
and
Yep.
working out who you are from an early age. Whereas us
Yep.
academics, we were just in our little bubble reading and we didn't have any
Yes.
people skills, so it takes a bit longer,
Yes.
but yeah.
Yes, it's interesting.
Yeah. Anyway, I think we'll end on that.
Yeah, no, that is good. This has been a very great chat. I
Yeah,
enjoyed
no,
it.
I've really enjoyed it, Sarah, and I think for anybody that would love to see your work and connect with you, where can they go to do so?
Well, I think the best place to do that, to connect with me, is definitely YouTube. So if you want more of the stories, you want more of all of that. So I also teach photography at the same time. That is, I just noticed the YouTube community is one of the richest. It's my smallest following, but it's the richest in terms of connection. So that's where I would come first. And then, of course, I have Instagram. I have all the social media, all of that stuff. And of course, I have a website.
Brilliant, fantastic, and I'll put a link to all of that in the show notes below. So, thank you so much
Perfect.
again for your time today. It's been so inspiring to hear your story, and I hope it's inspired many of the listeners as well.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this week's podcast. It really does mean the world to me. If you'd like to get further involved with Photographic Connections, including joining our supportive online community or attending one of our in-person events in Scotland, you can find all the details at photographicconnections.com. And now that this podcast has come to an end, there's only one thing left for you to do. It's time to pick up your camera and head outdoors. There's so many incredible photographic opportunities just waiting for you to discover.